number 8, which is an amendment to the agreement with Arte.
Okay, Christian Tabaris is on. We'd like to be able to share our PowerPoint. I know that some questions have been asked concerning our work with our vendors. And so, Christian, if you don't mind sharing. And we will go to, I believe it's slide number 2. And this is where, before I get into the actual amendment, which Christian will support us in presenting, I wanted to break down how we address conflicts of interest. As you know, the board has a very clear policy approved in 2018, policy 9270A, and we expect that our employees disclose potential conflicts of interest. If a conflict is identified or raised, the involved employee is separated from any decision-making related to the vendor. This process helps us to get to the transparency and the fairness that we have in our RFQ evaluation process. And of course, we look to ensure that we don't have bias and that our office and everyone else involved maintain integrity in the procurement process. In cases, and we have had multiple cases where these conflicts are raised, as I said previously, we separate the employee from the process. We'll talk about this a little more. I know there's some other questions that the board had raised. I just brought to my attention this evening, and we can talk about that a little bit more as we go through the RFQ process. But we wanted to be clear that we follow board guidelines on what constitutes a conflict, as well as ensuring that we put this specific practice in place, which is we're looking for disclosure or for identification. And we handle this through counseling. We've resent this board conflict of interest policy to our entire team. So as a reminder of what constitutes a conflict of interest, as well as ensuring that, as I said previously, there's no participation of the employee in any of the decision making. So with that said, we'll take the slide down and I will go to the presentation of the amendment and I'll turn it over to Christian.
Good evening, everyone. This is a resubmission of the previous amendment for Arte. This is to support 2 after-school sites over at Clinton Avenue and Jepson School. And the other portion is to support the McKinney-Vento identified students to participate in after-school programs at the Atwater Senior Center, as well as Saturday Academy sessions from 24 Saturday Academy sessions, as well as 10 college readiness sessions where we provide students who are McKinney-Vento the opportunity to gain more knowledge and opportunity to apply to secondary education and higher education.
And with respect to McKinney-Vento, as the manager of the McKinney-Vento, I review all of the proposals that comes through to ensure that it is aligned to our strategic plan, first and foremost, and to ensure that we are actually meeting the needs of our most vulnerable students. But critically to ensure that the vendor has the qualifications and the background and the track record to do this work. So this is something that we're putting forward because we certainly see the value of this work. And I previously mentioned our practice in addressing conflicts of interest that may be connected to this, as well as other agreements and other activities that we have in the district. And happy to answer your questions.
All right. And before I open it up for questions, you already alluded to one of the discussion items that we have later in this meeting is we periodically get an overview of the selection process, the request for qualifications selection process, which includes, dealing with any potential conflicts of interest, et cetera. So that is coming later. But we're talking about this here now because with this particular vendor, there is a conflict in the department in terms of a conflict of interest. So my understanding from what I'm hearing is that, this is employees, this is well known, has disclosed as required under policy, that the department and the superintendent, the district are all aware of this, and that safeguards are in place so that this person's removed from any decision-making, evaluation, or management of anything connected to this vendor. Is that kind of a good summary?
That's a very good summary.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll open it up for questions, if anybody has any from the the committee. Dr. Yarborough.
Yes. Thank you for presenting the service and also for presenting the district's policy or approach to conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. I think I would want to, Mr. Wilcox, I think I would want to actually go through the review process that's later on the agenda, and even talk more specifically about the conflict of interest at some point before agreeing to move this item to the full board for approval. That's just my initial thought as I seeking to learn more information about involved and how we want to navigate this, or me understanding how the district staff are navigating this.
Okay, so your suggestion here is that for this particular item, we wait until hearing we can wait and move all the items after the discussion items. We tend to do it. It was a practice we started to do when we started to have Zoom meetings, and there early on in the process, we had Zoom bombings and other things, and there was worry that a meeting might be interrupted. So we could certainly wait and move the items to the full board until after the discussion, if that works for you.
What do you think about this single item versus all the items?
I think it's 6 one way, half dozen. I mean, it's but it saves the potential of doing everything with one motion, but I'm just saying the format of when we do, or the timing that when we do this, as I recall, before COVID, it was kind of at the end of the meeting, we moved things.
I see.
But we started to do it because we had meeting interruptions. And so it was, we wanted to get the voting done before the discussion items in case something went wrong. So,
okay.
I think based on that, I'll just wait to move everything at the end. And but he's going to be able to be on. So
then
that'll address your concern.
Yes, I don't have a particular preference then in terms of when to move it or how to move it. I do have a question, I think, for Dr. Negron, just to hear what your perspective is and take is on our implementation of the policy and any concerns that you have or not about how we're working with this particular vendor or these particular vendors to provide services for our students and families.
Happy to share. Happy New Year. So I would say that it is my understanding that there have been multiple entities in the past and currently where there are issues pertaining to conflicts of interest. So I don't want to handpick one particular contractor, but what I do know is that there is, I had an opportunity to go back into the policy, speaking with Chief Joseph Lumpkin, to make sure that we are taking every part of that policy in its full context to make sure that when employees are being upfront and saying, might have a conflict of interest, that they're being removed from any kind of decision making. So that is what I'm trying to do with everything, and how we are approaching all of these different contracts, because we know, right, we have a lot of different partners that are here to support the work, who have done tremendous work for us. But again, I want to make sure that we're operating within existing policy. So I do want to thank Chief Joseph Lumpkin for going back to the department, rereading again the policy, and make sure that if when we have to remove individuals, that we're doing that, so that other folks in the department can handle those pieces. So in this case, I'm feeling confident that Chief Joseph Lumpkin has vetted it, also with Christian Tavares being at the helm as it pertains to this particular contract.
Thank you. And I guess another question for the three of you, maybe, as it pertains to this particular contract or other contracts that we work with, does our existing policy, are there any additions or amendments that you would make to how we are currently working with conflicts of interest? And is there something that you recommend be changed, either on a case-by-case basis or for the policy to be updated, given either the particular scenario with Arte or with other things that you come across that we approve?
I think, again, it's going to have to be one where we go back to the chief of the department that is engaging in a contract to make sure that we have a checklist of some sort to make sure that if a conflict has been articulated, that we are, again, removing the person from any kind of decision-making. And again, I want to reiterate, I am fully aware that this particular entity, Arte, has been doing work for a number of years. I mean, a number of years. I think, I want to say over a decade. And that conflict has been there, has been separated out. And again, I don't want us to just pick on Arte, because we also know there are plenty of other vendors with relationships as well. And again, we make sure that we're applying the policy so that we are not discriminating against any particular vendor.
So, yeah.
President Rivera?
Put my hand up, it went down. Yes, hi. I have a few questions, just because I've been hearing from the community about this, I guess because it was approved at the last F&O meeting. So my first question is, were other vendors approached for this work? Or was it just that we decided to pass it on to Arte? Like, how did that process work? I might have missed part of the discussion on it.
So we look at the scope of work that is presented by our vendors, and oftentimes we may have multiple vendors providing the same service because they service different communities. So there are other vendors that have done similar work as well as Arte.
But so I guess the response is there were no other vendors for this particular grant that were approached or that had an opportunity to bid on this work?
So no other vendor has approached us to specifically work with homeless students in this particular way.
Okay. Because I guess like I said, I've been receiving information and calls about this, and there are concerns because from what I'm hearing, the staff person sort of manages the grant or manages part of this grant, and their spouse manages this particular work. And I think the reason why it's raising eyebrows is the amount and the fact that it's a McKinney-Vento grant. So this is at least my concern with it. How are we going to remove the staff person from this work on our end if they've been managing this grant all along?
So the McKinney-Vento grant, the staff person is a liaison to McKinney-Vento. However, the management of the grant is under my auspices. So that is essentially the way that it's managed by my leadership.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just to reiterate, so we are going to be having as a discussion item a full overview of the request for qualifications process that this department uses for these programs. And there's also extensive information on the district website for youth, family, community engagement that has all the application materials. So if there are folks that want to present their qualifications to work with these areas or with any of the other after school programs, summer programs, break, April and February break programs, etc., that's the process that's in place. So it's probably good that we, just like we did last January, this January, we're having an overview of that process so that people are aware that that's how you can essentially, it's not so much bid on the work as to present your qualifications. So, and that this is the process by which all of the YFCE of these types of programs uses the request for qualifications process. And so we have approved many things based on that process. So that's why it's particularly good. We're spending time to make sure everybody fully understands that. President Rivera?
As I'm listening to you describe this, I'm wondering if, because I'm having some thoughts about it, I'm wondering if this is why Dr. Yarborough was suggesting that we wait to vote until after that discussion happened.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. I want everybody to be very comfortable. So we will do that after the discussion items is when we'll vote on moving anything to the full board. And of course, we can move everything or we can move partial. We have options in how we move things forward, or we choose not to move things forward. So, we have all those possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this specific item? All right. President Rivera, your hand's still raised. Is that something additional or is that just from previous?
No, I took it down on my end, but I do see that on the screen it's still raised.
Okay.
Let me try it again.
No worries. Thank you.
Go.
All right.
And
take it away and bring in anybody you need.
I think I still see Christian on, and we will begin sharing our documents, if that's okay.
Please.
So we'll go to the next slide. This is us. We wanted to make sure that we started the conversation with focus on where we're grounded. That is our strategic plan with our mission to essentially provide the best opportunities for all of our students and a clear vision to be that premier urban school district that ensures our students have the best possible opportunities available to them for career, college, and life. Our values, as you know, are rooted in equitable opportunities, high expectations, culture of continuous improvement, and collaboration. And we have also outlined here our priorities, academic learning, culture and climate, youth and family engagement, talented educators, and operational efficiencies. Next, please. Specifically, within our strategic plan, we're looking at the extended learning opportunities section, which we've highlighted the 4 key areas for our conversation this evening: extended learning opportunities, SAT Academy, extracurricular activities, giving families information about restorative practices, child development, and other social emotional tools, giving families and community partners providing families with additional academic tools and online resources to support students, and ensuring that we have extracurricular programs that have standards-based safety and medical protocols and procedures in place. Next, please. And so for the district context that helps us think about our work on a daily basis is you can see the comparison between Connecticut and New Haven for free and reduced lunch. We are about 65% of students, which is an indication of poverty. Our students with disabilities is about 17%, just below that of the state. We have just over 20% of our students are multilingual compared to the state at 9.7%. High need students combined is about 76%, and our students experiencing homeless thus far is at just over 700. Next slide, please. So as we think about after school, we like to quote the Wallace Foundation, which has done extensive research and work and providing guidance in after school. And they point to the fact that our community, which is our students come from oftentimes come from low economic status backgrounds, are underserved, and that after school provides our students with the opportunities to grow and learn and have fun. And when we do this right, it sets up that picture for change that gives students um, developmental as well as academic opportunities. Next, please. And so we're going to jump right into the lead aspect of our work, which is our request for qualifications. And this allows us to have strong strategic alignment to our district needs and with our strategic plan. It provides us with opportunities to vet to ensure that student school requirements and policies are met. And that goes along with our compliance and risk management, ensuring that insurance and state statutes and federal, state, local requirements are well represented in our work. Talk a little bit about the transparent procurement process that's aligned with this request for qualifications, and to also make sure that we're facilitating good decision making with strong and detailed vendor background. At this point, we're going to click onto the RFQ application section. And here you have the 23-24 components where we highlight the areas that we make sure that our vendors are aware that we are looking for services to support these areas. And we go into detail with our partners around how to access our request. This process usually happens early into the school year. We're doing it early into the year. So we expect by February or so that our vendors will have access to this information. We close the process around April. And these are the important components that we require from them. The insurance, all of the disclosure, certification, affidavits, W-9, detailed programming proposals, their end-of-year reports, and we ask for recent end-of-year reports so that we can have a sense of what's happening in their programs as well as the data reporting. The rest of this goes through details around the organization, the contact information, And if we scroll down, we look for even more details around the leadership who is submitting and further specific details. We ask within our scope of work particular questions, and you see we ask here about faith-based organizations because here we add additional guidance. If you are a faith-based organization, there is very specific guidance from the Office of Civil Rights Justice Department, and we want to be sure that we're able to provide that guidance. Again, the organizations tell us what their areas are, which we've pointed out earlier in the initial letter that we shared with you, what types of services that they offer. And just as a reminder, we're literally scrolling through the actual RFQ. We ask about summer programming right off the top because that's what we often try to settle as early as possible before we get into the actual school year, which in this case would be the 24-25 school year. Here, this is the RFQ is not finalized for the 24 school year, so you can see we're asking for summer programming for 23 in this current RFQ. This would be updated within the next week or so. And as they fill out this form, we go into more deeper details. Christian, I don't know if there's anything you want to add here that I might have missed.
No, you hit it all, but definitely we try to transition from the paper application into a more electronic application, just for efficiency and so we can store everything in one location. Prior years, we had binders about yay thick, about almost 5 to 6 inches thick. So we wanted to eliminate the use of all that paper and just be a little bit more efficient and have digital copies to refer back to and also to use when we actually write the contracts and the agreements with the community partners.
So I'm going to flip now into the after school questions that were raised. And we will go to the first slide. I think we're going to get deeper into the evaluation process. So, but to quickly respond to the questions, we are using multiple tools, including the nationally recognized after-school program assessment tool, which we borrowed from our competitive program 21st Century. We've applied for grants and have one there. And that assessment tool, we'll get into a little bit more detail later on, is a detailed quality assessment program. Our team is trained in that work, and it is focused on improving quality. So we will meet with the vendors, we will do the review utilizing the tool. And yes, we've had vendors and staff who have not demonstrated quality improvement. They are not invited back. They are not re-engaged in our after school or any of our programming if we are not seeing the quality improvement within that school year.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If we could just make sure everybody's mics are muted if they're not speaking. Thank you.
So this evaluation system allows for us to have continuous quality improvement and accountability in program delivery, and we'll share a little bit more about that as we go through. The next slide. Next slide, please. We discussed the direct or the indirect conflicts of interest. There were some questions asked there around the importance of separating employees and others from any decision-making process. We have had multiple conflicts that, you know, we know employees or BOE members or others who we have had contracts or who have relationships with organizations that we have contracts with. self-disclose, and we make sure that both employees or BOE members separate themselves from any decision-making around the particular vendor. Next slide, please. There's a question, and again, we addressed this a little bit deeper in the full report regarding the implications for ESSA funding, which is ESSA has been very generous to us, as well as yes, very generous to us. We are working, Dr. Negron is leading a budget review team looking at priorities, focusing on the shortfall and how we will address that. This process does involve YFC services. We are prioritizing services, including after school. And our goal is to mitigate the impact while at the same time managing the realities of the budget, the upcoming budget constraints. At the same time, our department is being proactive in identifying grants and working in partnership with our community agencies to see how we can enter joint relationships to apply for programming to support extended school hours. I think that's the end of that sub-presentation based on the questions that were submitted to us. So going back to, yes, go forward rather, to the next slide. So our RFQ, we received 41 RFQ submissions in 22-23, 54 in the current school year, and currently there are 16 active partners, and we've listed those active partners for you in alphabetical order. Next slide, please. We have talked here about prioritizing our Title I schools to ensure that there are after-school programs, particularly in the K-8 level. And currently we have 17 of our 19 Title I schools have after-school services. And that's making up for a total of 20 of our 31 schools. Overall, 20 of our 31 schools we have been able to fund through our after-school funding supports. So I'm going to turn this section over to Christian to talk a little bit about our funding sources.
Yeah, so this here is a breakdown of our allocations for this 23-24 school year for after school. So the side on the left, which is the blue, which reflect the ARP, ESSER, and Title I funding. This is the funding that we created proposals for our executive team to review and actually negotiate how much we will be given to actually support the after school programs. Those Title I schools that we weren't able to fund under Title I, we were able to use ARP ESSER funding to support those schools. So that's been very helpful. And as you can see, there's two Title I lines, one for after school and one for our Saturday Academy, which is servicing 3 sites, Roberto Clemente, Fairhaven, and Wexler Grant. And then the side on the right, which is our red side, is all of our competitive grants that we've been awarded throughout the years. So our extended school hours money, our 21st century grants, which are 3 different cohorts, 17, 18, and 19, servicing 8 sites. And as previously discussed, as we are preparing for the ESSER funding to be dried up, we have been proactive in applying to different grants. And we have recently been awarded 2 $169,000 grants for after-school programming to begin in the 23-24 school year, and it's extended all the way to 2025. So in total for this year, we have an allocation of $2,254,217, and that's servicing a little over 1,400 students. So in total, that's about $1,600 per year per student, and then averaged out, it would be $9 a day per student who participates in after-school programming.
Christian, could you change the slide so we can go to the last one that you just mentioned?
Yes.
I think you go for, oh, I'm sorry, go forward. Sorry, my apologies. Here it is. Yep. Sorry about that. You're good. Next slide. So here is a deeper conversation around the evaluations that we are using. And this is, we try to clean this up as best. There's probably a graphic that could be used that would better explain the program assessment system. And this is adapted by the CSDE for after-school programs based on the National Institute of Out-of-School Time. We will be using the core components. I mentioned the APT. We'll be surveying academic and youth outcomes. We'll be surveying staff, teachers, and our participants. And then we'll be also doing a data analysis component that looks at reflection and discussion of the data that we are collecting. And this year, in collaboration with the University of Connecticut, we are looking to implement the strengths and difficulties questionnaire, which gives us an idea of where our students are from the perspective of their sense of belonging, social emotional needs, etc. Christian, if you want to go a little bit into detail, a little bit more about this.
Yes, so the SDQ is actually a pilot survey that is being implemented to 21st century sites. So the first round was actually conducted in early November to just get an understanding of where the students stand in the beginning of the school year. And then there will be a post survey towards the end of the school year around mid-May to actually hear the students' voice and see how they actually were engaged during the after-school program. So the goal is to gather that post and that pre-survey to see how effective our programs are, and not only in providing the material, but actually in having a sense of belonging to our students.
Next slide, please. And for our Saturday Academy, we implemented an academic side of our work called the Footsteps to Brilliance. And also in Saturday Academy, we are going to be putting in the same systems that are in our after-school programs to, as we just described, to also get a sense of what the impact is and the assessments using evidence-based assessments and evaluations. So the Footsteps to Brilliance was our literacy program, which was recommended by our literacy department. It's an online program that supports students' phonics as well as comprehension skills. And we've actually, so if you go to the next slide, we actually so we measured how much time, how many words, how many books were read, and the experiences that students had during the 22-23 school year. This is from last year. And based on, and I know these slides, we really try to capture this as clearly as possible, demonstrate that in this little pilot, we had about 100 students participating, that we were able to see the growth in specific areas. And so we plan to expand more thoroughly in Saturday Academy this year. In fact, we are expanding more thoroughly throughout for all of our students in Saturday Academy, the Footsteps to Brilliance literacy program. Next, please. And so our next steps is to continue to strengthen our evaluations, to incorporate the after school, as we discussed, to continuously seek grants, along with working with our district opportunities to deal with the financial cliff, to deepen our work with families in our after school work, to ensure that our work is evidence-based, and to include in our RFQ process, we have teachers and staff and our team are involved in reviewing and we are going to expand to include community partners, parents, and school leaders. And that's an overview. We wanted to be brief and so that we could open up for conversations. We can close.
All right, thank you. And before I open it up for questions, I'll just make the request that the presentation we just saw is posted to the website tomorrow under the other meeting materials for this meeting. So any comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes. So thank you for preparing this and walking us through it. It's long awaited, and you're able to answer some of the questions that I had. And thank you very much for just the data that's involved, the numbers and the names. I appreciate the footsteps to brilliance chart where you showed the growth in reading, because that's definitely one of our goals, is to help our children to be better readers, and also to enjoy reading. So it's just exciting to see that there's some forward progress in that. So thank you very, very much. I had a couple of questions. One is just kind of definitions. In one of your slides where you showed funding and encumbrances, there was staff, and then there were a line for staff and a line for contracts.
Mm-hmm.
How do the two differ? Is staff New Haven Board of Education staff, people who work in our district, and contracts are the contractors, or how are those numbers different, please?
Yes. So oftentimes in our after-school programs, there's a component where our staff provides tutoring, homework help. These are teachers and paraprofessionals, and Board of Education part-time staff that works up to 10 hours a week, which means they're generally working about 2 hours a day on after-school programming and specifically supporting the academic and sometimes even club and enrichment programs. On the community partner side, it's specifically those community partners who provide chess and recreation and arts and craft and culinary and Eli Whitney and the science museums. So we have this I think, a beautiful balance of our staff bringing their expertise, certification, tutoring, teaching skills in all of our after school, as well as our community partners bringing also their creativity and their experience and this, what, I like to say, this indigenous relationships with our families. And this will also look like mentoring supports and college and career, and as I also mentioned, arts and craft and other services. So this is what, again, Wallace and others, the research, the evidence tells us is what makes this after school successful is when we have this relationship between our schools and our community partners in the interest of meeting the needs of the school and students.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have additional questions. I also see Ms. Hannons has a hand raised.
You have additional questions, or?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and finish with your questions, and then I'll move on to others.
Thank you. So looking at the different contractors, I think maybe 16 or 17 that you named, when you compare funding between the different providers or the different contractors, what do you see in terms of the funding of staff, the funding of the programming, and particularly, I'm interested in the data. I want to know if people are receiving equitable funding for the services that they provide and the time that they provide. Do you ever negotiate up investing in the providers who are servicing our children, or either negotiate down investing in the providers who are servicing our children?
Right. So as we discussed previously, first of all, we want to get the best possible service to our students. but we work with limited funds. And yes, there is negotiation and conversation. We compare broadly to what is expected at the state level. We use 21st century measures that would come from CSDE type templates around acceptable funding. And yeah, we have conversations with Boys and Girls Club, with any number, all of our vendors are subject to conversations around how do we get the best possible service for our students, given that we have limited funds. But I think to your point, Dr. Yarbrough, we don't want to undercut our vendors. You know, they still have to pay staff, they have to purchase material, they spend time, substantial time, and put in substantial energy. Oftentimes they are nonprofit, they're locally based, and they have a deep commitment to our students and families. And we do tend to ask them to give a little so that we could have more students, provide more services, and every single one of them have gone along with our requests. At the same time, we try not to be absurd to the point where the provider cannot provide a quality service. We have those conversations, they come back to us. The prices, the costs are obviously different. As I said previously, if someone is providing arts and crafts versus someone who's providing culinary arts, the services might be a little bit different at a different cost. So we weigh all of that based on our experience, our training. We'll work with CSDE, Wallace, and the Connecticut After School Network in particular. We seek guidance from our program managers at the state if we feel that we're not sure. So we're not on our own with this work. We are involved. We work very closely with our program managers at the state funding, as well as the Connecticut After School Network. We're involved in deep training. There's an extensive amount of training to help us strengthen our abilities to communicate with our vendors. Critically, it's the relationships that we have with vendors so that we could have honest conversations about what we can and cannot do to achieve the services for our students.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You showed that in terms of the number of vendors that we have, so I think maybe 40 or 50 applied between last year, maybe this year, and then there are 17 or so that we're currently working with. So two questions. One, is that number 17 the total number that we have contracted with so far this year, or is it larger than that? And my second question is, what is our process for trying on a new vendor that maybe they're new to working with the district? What is our process for trying them on and seeing that they're able to provide what they are suggesting that they're able to provide?
Right. And so we do that. We bring them for Footsteps to Brilliance, for example, was a new vendor for us. And we started small with them. First of all, we want to, if we don't know you, we want to know more about you. So we look for those, I forget the word, recommendations from partners who are like New Haven or community organizations where they have worked in the past. And so we start with small steps, smaller agreements, see how they work out. We've had vendors that we have brought in to work with a small group of students at one school who over the years, due to the quality of work that they've presented and the evaluation process is critical. So we invite new partners to join. We make sure that their work is aligned to the strategic plan, aligned to what we're trying to, what we've outlined in our RFQ. we establish a small introductory process initially. We put in the evaluation components based on those three elements: our strategic plan, the RFQ, the evaluation components, which includes feedback. We make a decision as to if we're going to continue or expand the work. I am pleased to say that oftentimes with these new and smaller organizations, we have gotten very good results and have expanded our work to some of those smaller vendors who are doing outstanding work for us.
Thank you. What's the decision process between going from bringing on a new vendor versus expanding the services of an existing vendor? So sometimes I think I see with F&O that we have a vendor that we've approved, and then the agreement will come back up to add additional funds because they're replicating locations or they're expanding or adding more students. I also think there might be occasions where instead of maybe taking that vendor and bringing them to an additional school, you may want to bring in a new vendor who we don't currently have a contract with and have them serve that school and those students there. But how do you decide whether to bring on an additional vendor or to expand the scope of services for an active vendor?
Evaluation, evaluation, evaluation. Really using our evaluation process to see if this vendor is actually working for us. When we have a vendor with a great relationship with a school, and that principal oftentimes, that school comes to us and say, we want more of this. If there is an opportunity to say, well, think about another vendor, we may go to that. But frankly, Dr. Yarbrough, when someone is doing well in our schools and our students and our families are happy, and the schools are asking for more of that, we tend to want to expand that work. Our new vendors, as they come in and they develop, and we've seen that happen with particular vendors, we will expand their work. I believe your question is, well, would we give another vendor a chance who we have not had experience with? If the school is looking to expand a current vendor, it is unlikely that we're going to go back and say, oh, why don't you try this vendor who is brand new? We want to build those relationships, go through an evaluation process with a new vendor first before we actually expand without enough data, background material for us to move forward. So the direct response is we expand based on evaluation and based on the feedback specifically that we get from the schools and our students and our families at times.
And if so, not expanding within a school, but thinking about adding an additional school to have an after-school program or a certain type of certain category of topic, arts and crafts, sports, media. What's in your decision making in terms of just taking an existing vendor and asking them to multiply to a new school versus bringing in a new vendor who may be able to serve that new school that may not have experience with the active vendor?
Yeah. So if we have a vetted new vendor who we are able, and we've done that, who we are able to expand, and I think your question is mid-year, right? So if we are already doing, I'm using chess as an example, one of my favorite. You've heard me talk about that here. We have a vendor who is providing chess or maybe dance, and there is an opportunity for us to bring in a new vendor. If we've gone through the vetting process, we have in the past brought in mid-year, tried a new vendor, and under the evaluation process, under our vetting based on, for lack of a better word, background checks, communicating with previous organizations that the vendor had provided services for, we will. We will, and we have brought in a new vendor to maybe provide similar services that are currently being provided by an established vendor.
Thank
I
you.
think that's
It does answer that. So thank you
okay.
very much.
You're welcome.
You mentioned your evaluation process. How many of our staff members, our evaluators, will go to a site, perhaps at the same time, or go to a site for an evaluation so that there are multiple inputs in terms of how a vendor is doing?
So it depends. Currently, we have usually, and Christian, you can correct me, but in terms of the decisions that I've been involved with, one trained provider, after school evaluator, to visit the with the provider, with the after school program provider, and we go through a process of the quality areas that we are looking to evaluate. And so it's one person, but I hear you saying, well, maybe we can do three at the same time. Often this evaluation involves a pre component where we make sure that the program is aware that we are visiting. We don't just like roll up on our partners. The schools are aware, and there are multiple folks who are participating on site. So it may be ourselves along with the principal, the building leader, and the vendor, and we're all together looking at the evaluation components and agreeing what we saw and what we didn't see, and what the expectations are for the improvement components.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Dr. Yarbrough, to just chime on top of that is there's certain sections on the APTO evaluation that from start of the program to the end of the program. So they're looking at arrival, the transitions between classrooms, homework and academic support. So specific programming going on in the after school program, informal and social time. So what are they actually talking about or doing when they're having a snack or just waiting to be transitioned? What activities do they have? And also the pickup and drop off for the students. So we're evaluating every single section, and there's always going to be a minimum of 2 people evaluating the program site. So it's going to be one of our central office staff that go around, or the building leader at the site. And also the principal could chime in and actually participate in the evaluation. The more people, the merrier, because everybody takes a score, comes back at the end and writes, we write one full summary of the overall program evaluation. So everybody has a say on what's going on in the APTO.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. There's one document that I saw tonight that had, I guess, had maybe 4 different raters, and then it took an average of the rating. And I saw just one rater in there, and then the average of it. So yeah, so what you described, having 2 or more, and then having a conversation about what was observed, seems to be very fruitful. Thank you very much. I was going to ask a question about, the impact on attendance. I think you've spoken about it before, but you've also said that, I think in your last slide, what you're looking at in the future is seeing like what the impact is on attendance, on academic performance, and other things. I think that would be great in 2 ways. One, it will allow us and our vendors and our parents to know how these services are really serving our students, and for families to bring out their children to this. But it can also make a case for new funding sources that we're really able to provide some of these additional services, and our students are engaging and seeing better results. One of the future times when we talk, I would love to see, for the particular active vendors, their evaluations over time, and what the trajectory is and how they're doing, and what their evaluations have been. And also maybe a graphic to show the various partners we've had over maybe the past 5 years, and who's continued with us and for how long, versus who's new. I think one thing that's important for me is that the individuals the vendors who step forward to say they would like to serve our students, that given they're qualified, that they really do have a good shot at being selected to serve our students and families, that they can kind of break in and serve. And those vendors that may be receiving more and more services, which may be stretching them, may not be stretching them, I don't know, that maybe we can spread some of the services to new vendors so they can become more comfortable serving our district, and we can really expand the skill set that we bring to our families, particularly if they bring something additional and unique to the pool. But thank you very much for walking through what you've walked through. I appreciate the time, and thank you for being in conversation with my questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Ms. Hannons, you had your hand up.
Good evening, and again, Happy New Year to all. Just one quick question to satisfy my curiosity. On the slide that you showed how much money was allocated to each pot of money, was the number that you're showing there, that's just what was spent to what you've obligated to date? And I may have already answered my own question, but I noticed that the numbers didn't add up to the allocation. So before you post this slide, I needed to get that question answered for me. So,
Yeah.
like, what is that slide really showing?
If I'm correct, and it's the encumbrances.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Hannons,
I'm sorry.
are you okay?
Yeah, I hear you now. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. It includes the encumbrances.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay,
so as we continue looking for additional supports, or additional teachers, additional staff, expanding programming. Some of our programs are federal, and we will continue services through the summer. That would be, some of our 21st Century Title I grants. So the current encumbrances is what's reflected there.
All right, thank you.
And Christian, you can chime in.
That is correct. As of December 20th, if I'm not mistaken, that week, that's when I checked all the Munis reports as to where our current expenditures are.
Okay. We might want to look at, but we can talk offline, because we might want to just maybe change some of the wording then.
Would love to have your feedback on clarifying that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I recommend adding that explanation as to, just so to answer anybody else's questions that might have a similar question. So, an annotation on the slide to provide the definitions. Was there any other questions you had, Ms. Hannons?
No, that was it.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? I'll just say thank you for this presentation. I mean, it's something we heard last January, but it's also even more detail, really outlining the process. I appreciated the fact that through the RFQ process, we're seeing increasing number of potential vendors applying to be part of this, and so I think that's encouraging. That means people are finding ways of doing this. And so that might be something also, maybe even to add into the questionnaire that you use is, how did you learn about this opportunity? Just so that you have that data to know how to be reaching out to increase, to continue to increase that number, so you have the best selection pool for this. So I appreciated seeing that. I appreciated also, kind of the rundown of the financial information and the extensive information on how the evaluation happens, the selection, et cetera, that, adds credence to the previous comments on agreement we were looking at about how this process works, that there can be multiple people involved in the process and checks in the system to to be getting not just one person's input, but several people's input. I liked even that idea of increasing it. It's almost like a 360 evaluation kind of model of increasing the pool of people providing their opinions on the services. I think that gives your department a better picture of from a wide variety of viewpoints as to what's happening. It also allows good feedback for the vendor. Particularly if the teachers, for instance, or the paras are seeing something that maybe you all aren't, but they're going to have a different perspective. So I think increasing that is even better. So I appreciate that. And as I've requested, if we could just have this posted, because we should have all our information posted soon after the meeting, in case other people have questions. I know other board members review all the materials from this meeting as well, and I imagine other members of the public. So thank you. Anything else on this item? Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wilcox, I know I requested that one of the agreement items or contract items be moved until after this presentation and conversation. And so thank you for doing that. And my comment is I don't necessarily know how to proceed because we haven't really spoken in any detail about particular evaluations on any of the vendors and also not Arte, but also not in specifics in terms of conflict of interest and how we're navigating it and how it's navigated in particular scenarios. I know that it was presented and we spoke about that the policy is followed, but it doesn't necessarily bring up the specifics of this vendor and the topic at hand. So I'm just saying that to say that I don't necessarily know how to proceed because I don't know that anything was cleared up. Though I do have a much more clear and a much broader or wider understanding of this department and the services that we do get an opportunity to contract with vendors to provide for our students and families. So I do appreciate the time a lot.
Well, I'm happy to take the time as needed for these things. I mean, a lot of things that I've heard did deal with specifics in terms of for the particular contract or agreement at hand that we've heard the process of how people are selected, how they're evaluated, how policies are being followed in terms of if there is a conflict of interest, which is not just for this particular agreement. I mean, I have conflicts of interest and I follow board policy and did it recently. And my wife took a part-time job with United Way. So on a project that has Workforce Alliance funding. So I recuse myself on anything to do from that point forward with United Way and also by extension Workforce Alliance. And so that's, we have various conflicts throughout the district on the board and in staff. And the question is, are the policies in place, which is the board's responsibility? And then are they being followed, which is the superintendent and the district's responsibility? And I've heard from various people saying, yes, that is the case. And I'll also say, I've been on this board for about 4.5 years, and I heard about this conflict with this particular vendor before I got on the board, saying, keep an eye on that, and been keeping an eye on it. And what I've not heard is somebody saying there's problems there, that the vendor is not providing the work, they're not doing a good job, they're not fulfilling what their obligations are under the agreements that we give them. So those are the things that I've heard, which is why I've continued to support them on the various agreements. I mean, this is an amendment to an agreement the board already approved. So those are some of the reasons why when you talk about what we do now, my thought is we move the action items and we typically move them with a recommendation to approve. We occasionally ask for something to be memorialized in a memo, which we certainly could do that. Just please put this in a memo so that it's also in a succinct form for our board colleagues to also review. And if we don't have the 3 committee members that are willing to support that, then I'm happy to move it without a specific recommendation, but just to be able to move it from here to the full board's consideration so that we can not hold up this work, because I'm assuming it needs to get started at some point, where we're going to have programs at Fame, Daniels, Troop, Truman, etc., not happening.
I think thank you for naming all of that. I think to the points you've raised, so services and budget, well, let me back up. I'm new to hearing about the topic. So I don't have a history of hearing about the topic or the conflict. So I'm approaching it like, this is day one for me. And I think what information could be useful and helpful would be, one, how strong are the services? Is the vendor meeting? So we were to look at this particular vendor, is the vendor meeting the services contracted for in a strong way? And I think that would be demonstrated through just showing the results of several evaluations, hopefully different evaluators, multiple times throughout a year, or whatever the cadence is, saying like, this vendor is providing strong services for what we're doing. And then the other part is on the fiscal side, that the resources are being invested and spent in the way that we've contracted, or that has been decided. I'm not sure what our contract entails with them, or with any vendor, when we say, here's the award that we're agreeing for, and how it's actually spent. And if there would be a third topic, it would just be on the longevity of the vendor. And our district continued to demonstrate that we're working with strong partners, and we're also not stopping anyone else from coming in and also being a strong vendor for us. But I think for me, especially all 3, but particularly the first 2 might be able to be answered quickly. It's kind of concretely saying, this is our evaluation, and this is how we see this scenario, and we think it's on the up and up to support it in full.
So if I may, from what I heard that is actionable, because there's multiple things in there. One is specific to this particular agreement, and the other is in maybe more detail in general of the things that we do through this process. So it sounds like what a pathway forward with this particular agreement is that we move it to the full board, and we request that a memo is created that just outlines that this is what the conflict is, and this is how the district policy is being dealt with, and this is why the department and the district thinks this is a vendor to continue to work with based on the evaluations and the other data that you specifically mentioned about the quality of their work. And then if that is provided to the board and posted publicly by Friday, then people would have, by the time you get the actual binding vote, which is the board vote on Monday, you'd be able to review that material.
Yes, yeah. And I think in providing specific data on the evaluation of performance, and also our agreement in terms of budget and how the money is being invested. I don't know to what degree we ask for receipts, or there's a breakdown of how the money is invested. But those 2 things I think would really clarify any potential conflict of interest, and give me, and maybe give the public clear thoughts to move forward.
Okay, so that sounds like, you know, that could be added to the memo, that just kind of outlines this process and how it's being dealt with. I do also think moving forward, I mean, we have other processes for this moving forward. We have been talking about, and I know staff have been working on revisions to our cover memos. We'll just specifically ask for this particular item, are there any conflicts of interest based on board policy? And if so, how are they being dealt with, so that everything is just spelled out? Transparency is my goal. I need people to have trust in the process, so that we can all get the work done together, as opposed to people being suspicious or, you know, aspersions cast on anybody or any vendor. So, I mean, we can do that in the future, just to make it very clear, just like we do with, like, when I'm recusing myself on items and when others recuse themselves. Dr. Negron?
Yes, Mr. Wilcox, I just wanted to say that I appreciate that recommendation, because I believe that that would be asking all vendors moving forward the same question. Again, I'm all about equity, which is one of my core values. And I want to make sure that all this work, again, centers in that. So I do appreciate that suggestion, Chief Joseph Lumpkin. Maybe then we can talk about how do we standardize that as part of the application process moving forward.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to make the motion to move these items, because we still have another item on the agenda, which is going to take some time probably to discuss. So I think we need to come to closure on this. So unless anybody's unwilling for me to move these items forward, please speak now. Understanding that there'll be, for this particular one, there'll be a memo provided that'll have the extra information. And again, this is all a good process because it makes it very transparent. We're talked about this relatively extensively, and I think it was worth the investment of time. And then also another new thing in this is, you know, we have a new superintendent, so it was also her words also on her understanding of the process and the work that she's been doing on this, and I have confidence through all this she's had her full attention on this as well. So I think this is all encouraging. So with your all's permission, I will make a motion, and that is, I move that we send to the full board with a recommendation to approve the 5 abstracts, the 21 agreements, the 4 contracts, which does not include the cross weight room, which has been pulled, and the 5 purchase orders and the 1 change order.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So those items will move. And